Satnam and Namaste. Welcome to this short presentation on the Nadis and the Chakras. I have another series of videos on YouTube that focuses on the whole point and purpose of yoga, and we go through the 8 steps of Raj Yoga. And in this presentation, I want to take it to a higher level. I want to talk about what's really going on underneath the surface of yoga. And of course, those who practice know that the whole thing is all about the mind, despite what it looks like, people walking around with their yoga mats and treating it as if it was a physical practice. What it's really about is the mind, all forms of yoga. But still, even beyond the mind, what it's really about is going beyond the self and the mistaken notion of the small self, as we would say in Zen, or the limited small s self, as we say in yoga, going beyond the delusion of the separate self and entering into what we call samadhi, or divine realization, God realization, merging. That's what yoga means, to merge. So that's what it's really all about. But do you know what I find most fascinating? The energetic component of the whole thing. It's like there's this facade, there's this body, the face that we wear and our hair and our clothes and even our skin. And underneath it all, there's this complex energy transport. This whole system, that's really what we are, this complex system of energy transport. And I think of, as an analogy, kind of a fun analogy hopefully, I think about Europe. And if anybody's traveled through Europe, you know that underneath the ground, this facade, where all the beautiful museums are and the beautiful pathways and things to see and historical monuments, underneath it all, hidden away underground, is this complex but interconnected system of tunnels, or in Paris, catacombs, and layers, and they're all connected, miles and miles long. And they're transporting, people, and they're used for things, and metros are traveling through them, and that's kind of a comparison of what's going on inside our bodies. And that's what the nadis are. The nadis, which comes from nad, the Sanskrit nad, which just means tunnel or movement in some translations, refers to, it's kind of like the Chinese meridian system. That's how acupuncture works. Except in yoga, going back to Ayurveda, there are 72,000 nadis. So imagine, on a subtle level, there's this energy transport going on underneath our skin, whereby energy, we'll call it prana, travels via these nadis, 72,000 of them. Obviously, we can't focus on 72,000 nadis, but I will highlight 3 main nadis, and that's the Shushmuna, or Shushumna. In our tradition of Kundalini Yoga, we say Shushmuna, and there's the Ida and the Pingala. And they run along the spine, and I'll talk a little bit more about them in particular in a few minutes. But first, I've just mentioned prana. We can say that the nadis carry this vital force, this life energy called prana. It's equivalent to the Chinese qi. And we can call it energy, but really it's so much more than energy. We can call it this vibrating, pulsating energy that enlivens the entire universe. And it's what we are. We're a part of it. We're a part of this flow, this dynamic flow. It's what gives us our radiance, our life. But it's got to flow via some channel, and those are the nadis. So far we've talked about nadis and prana, and there's also apana, which is, we can equate it with the negative aspect of prana, kind of like a battery. We have the positive component and the negative component, or the yin and the yang, and both go together. They're mutually dependent parts of a whole. So by calling it negative, we're not saying it's worse than, we're not naming its value. We're saying that it's this other component of the energy system. And in yoga, there are always these opposites, and we're working to balance them. And so there's prana, this positive force, and apana, the eliminative force. On a higher level, that which rids us of what no longer serves us. And we want to mobilize these 2 forces through the practices of yoga. And it doesn't matter whether you're practicing bhakti or karma yoga or Raj yoga, whether you're meditating or serving or chanting. The ultimate purpose, just to keep us grounded, is to get us beyond the small self, to get to that stillness of the mind called samadhi. And we get beyond the self through these yogic practices. Even Zen can be looked at as a high form of yoga, sitting and reaching that point of stillness, getting beyond the self, merging, whatever we choose to call it. But again, there's an energetic component to all of this. And that's what happens underneath the surface. We're allowing the flow, and when it flows, wowee zonkers, divine realization. So let's go further. So I like to ground us. I like to, before we connect the dots, I like to keep us focused on the whole main point and purpose. Like, why do we want to do this? Why do we want to mobilize the prana through the nadis? We've already identified those words and defined them to some extent, but what's the ultimate purpose? What's the big idea? The big idea is to control the mind, and the little bit of Taoist in me doesn't really like the word control too much, but I got over it because I understand that what it really means is, again, reaching that point of stillness. And further, it means harnessing. By controlling, we mean harnessing that flow of energy, containing it. And if you've watched my other videos on yoga, that's when we start to get into the higher practices, especially pratyahar and dharana, steps 5 and 6, where we start to bring that energy inward rather than allow it to disperse. And normally these steps are translated as resisting disturbances from the outside and also from the inside. But let's now turn it into a different kind of vocabulary. Let's now think about it in terms of what's happening on the energetic level. When our attention is scattered, our energy is scattered. When we're distracted, our energy is dispersed. And what we want to do, and that's where the word control comes from, is harness that energy by containing our mind, by focusing our mind, by nurturing our ability to concentrate. Because when we put our awareness on something, we stay steady. And we want the mind to stay steady, because again, it's all about the mind. Yoga, you might say, is one and the same as controlling our energy. Yeah, it's about the mind, but again, there's that energetic component. We're controlling the energy, we're bringing it inwards. And everything starts with our minds. Our perceptions start with our minds. Who we are comes from our perception of ourself and the identity that we wear, or should I say the identities that we wear. What we do, what we say, who we think we are. It all comes from our minds. And think about it. Think about going through the day, all of the things that we respond to throughout the course of a day, things that frustrate us, things that cause us stress. It's not the thing, because the thing might have a totally different effect on somebody else. It's the way we perceive that event. It's our perceptions. It's our mind that causes us to respond in a certain way. Only all too often we're not responding intellectually or intuitively. We're just going through habitual reactions, reacting, because we haven't gotten into a practice of harnessing that energy and controlling the mind. That's what yoga is, and that's why we want to do this. So when I say, what is this all about? Why do I want to harness my energy? Because I want to steady my mind so that I can recondition those responses, that patterning, and I can overcome my own dysfunctions, and I can not be so frustrated, and I can overcome the stress that saps me of my own vitality, because that's what stress does. It saps us from our ability to stay steady in the face of conflict and in the face of confrontation or obstacles, all of the obstacles that we have to find a way around on a daily basis. When my mind is still, I can better find my way around those obstacles, but I've got to harness that energy, because if I'm just on autopilot and I'm reacting and I'm spinning and I'm getting mad, you can feel the dispersion of energy. You feel your palms sweating, you feel your heart beating fast, your mind starts spinning. That's the dispersion of energy. That's what we want to harness. That's what we want to prevent. We want to contain that energy so that we have our wits about us. Because all of that, as my teacher Yogi Bhajan says, all of that emotion and commotion just drains us and makes us unable to sort of function at a high level according to our highest capacity and our potential as human beings. And even if we're not yogis, that's why we're here, to harness that potential. It's just that we don't know where to look. And if you haven't developed a practice, we're looking in all the wrong places. But that's what we really want. We want prana. And when we feel fatigued and when we feel depressed, and now those are everyday words, we're looking in the wrong places. We're looking on the outside to try to make ourselves feel better. We're taking things, we're popping pills, and we're distracting ourselves further with things that feel good for a little while. But it's only a temporary band-aid. It's only a temporary feel-good, a little bit of pleasure. And it's got that dark side, because when it's over, we crash, and then we look for the same thing again. A pick-me-up in all the different forms, and all the media tells us, if you buy this, you'll be happy, and if you do this, you'll be, and take this, and who do you know that's not suffering from some sort of anxiety or depression disorder? But again, that's where yoga comes in, because we want to develop that ability to stay steady and to find a way around those blocks without turning to those external means of prana fulfillment. I couldn't help but remember that movie Sideways, where Thomas Hayden Church's character says to Paul Giamatti's character, "Did you drink and dial?" And when we're sort of under the influence of our own uncontained minds, which is worse than being drunk, our judgment becomes unclear. We become impatient. We say things we didn't want to say. We say things we wish we could take back. We do things we wish we didn't do. We have meltdowns, freakouts. We go postal. That is why we want to harness our energy. And we can feel it. Traffic gets the best of us, and we yell out, and we can feel it. We can feel our hearts beating fast. That, again, that's all of our energy leaving us. And so, all the point and purpose of the whole thing is that modern living is no help at all, with all of the stresses that it brings on. And stress is just distress on our energetic body, on that subtle level of energy transport that we've been talking about. It means we create our own constrictions. It's like a hose. Think of stress making us tensed up, and now the energy can't flow. We end up blocked, and that's when we stop performing to the best of our ability. And we get impatient, we get frustrated more easily, because we're not contained, we don't have the resources. Think about it as prana just evaporating, right? And worse is that when we're stressed out, our body actually uses more oxygen. And so we're just, it's like a muscle car, we're just burning our own fuel, because we're living in a hyper stressed out state all the time, where our glandular system is tweaked. And we've got cortisol, and now, doctors and psychologists are starting to understand the process better, and the extent to which our minds and our bodies are connected. But the yogis have known it for 5,000 years. The extent of this connection, the fact that our mind is the root of it all. And when we are distressed, it's like that constricted hose where the energy can't flow, and we get ourselves into trouble. So as an analogy, think about all of those wind turbines, those turbines that generate wind power as a renewable source of energy. That's what we want. That's why we breathe. That's the importance of pranayama, which, if you watch my videos on the 8 steps, that's even more important than the asana. That's actually the key to the whole thing, because that's our renewable source of energy. It's like the wind, and we have it available all the time so that we can be contained and counter the effect of all of the stressful events that we encounter every day by breathing properly, because we want to be contained, not drained. There's a motto for you. So, back to those 3 main nadis. The Shushmuna, or Shushumna, which runs along the center of our spine, the Ida, which runs along the left, and the Pingala, which runs along the right. These are the 3 main nadis, or vehicles, which carry our prana. Think about the Shushmuna as the sacred pathway that carries the sacred Kundalini energy. And now I've just introduced another term, Kundalini. But, people complicate this unnecessarily. Prana, there's Kundalini, there's Shakti, there are different words we use for energy in its different forms. It's kind of like water in its different forms. We have ice. We have water in its liquid form. And when it evaporates, it becomes gaseous. It evaporates, and now we have the gas. water in its gas form. So we have different forms of the same substance. Think about energy that way. So when we activate our energy through spiritual practice, we mobilize it and it rises up through the Shushmuna. Now we have allowed the Kundalini to rise. That's our soul. That's our capacity. That's our creativity. That's our aliveness. And when the Kundalini rises, we're able to use our intuition. We're undoing those blocks that hold us back. But first, the Ida and the Pingala have to be clear. They have to do their work. The Ida is the left side. The Pingala is the right side. Think about them like the yin and the yang. The Ida is the negative force. It's that cooling energy. It's the apana. It's the yin. It's likened to that feminine energy. Whereas the Pingala is the sun force. Surya in Sanskrit. The active force, the prana, the heat. Always these opposite forces have to be balanced in yoga. And when they are balanced, that main channel, the Shushmuna, opens up and the Kundalini rises. These channels meet at the third eye and then they terminate at the nostrils. One more reason why breathing is so important in yoga. These channels extend from the spine, and when they merge at the third eye, that's the point at which we become able to see, to be intuitive, to really see beyond the left brain, beyond analysis, beyond the world of appearances, beyond what yogis call Maya, delusion, the illusion of the separate self. Those energies meet at the third eye and we can see. We overcome that dualistic viewpoint, our own delusion. We achieve samadhi. That's what it's all about. That's what every spiritual practice is all about. That's why monks meditate. That's why we sit on the cushion for so long, to achieve that state of samadhi, divine realization. Some people call it bliss. If you're in Zen, it's just ordinary. It's seeing without the mess and the junk of our own ego and all of its delusion and all of the hang-ups and all of the stuff that holds us back. It's allowing the mud to settle. We want to do this because we want to be awake. And when that Kundalini rises, that's when we experience our own transformation. That's when we awaken. It's one and the same event. We want to access the clarity that comes with that awakening. We want to master our insanity, which is what it really means to still the mind. That's the inner peace we talk about, mastering all of that insanity that everyone thinks is so normal, all of the depression and fatigue and the freakouts and the meltdowns and the anxiety and the panic. We want to master that, and that's the awakening that is simultaneous with the awakening of the Kundalini. And that's what all yogas are really all about, at heart, at the root of it all. So, the short answer is that we want to achieve the highest states of consciousness. That's our purpose. That's our purpose as humans, to achieve our potential, to awaken. We just don't know it because we're distracted all of the time and we're too busy and we're tired and we haven't awakened to this true purpose. And again, the world we live in doesn't make it any easier because they're telling us to buy and to go get distracted some more and to fulfill ourselves with cheap passing pleasures that only make us wanting more and that get us into debt and that get us addicted in a million different forms of addictions. But when we step away from all of that, we pull ourselves up into our higher consciousness. We realize that we had the tools all along inside of ourselves, especially breathing. That is the key to the mind, the master key to those higher states of consciousness. We want to pull the prana upward, allowing the apana to go downward, and they mix at the navel center, and they ignite, and like a spiritual lightsaber, the Kundalini rises, and we awaken. It's like the spiritual energy sword, if you will. And so the effects really are simultaneously therapeutic, because we achieve a balanced state of being, a greater sense of well-being. Our nervous systems are balanced, our glandular systems are balanced, we are peaceful inside. We know we have the tools inside to balance ourselves, but it's spiritual because that higher consciousness is our divine awakening. Some people call it God. Our divine realization, as Paramahansa Yogananda says. Now, there are little gateways whereby this Kundalini travels, and those are called the chakras. 7 chakras, or 8 in our tradition of Kundalini Yoga. So that's what I want to talk about next in a very brief form. You can think about chakras as those revolving passageways in hotels. The energy travels via these chakras. They are either blocked or unblocked. They are likened to our different states of consciousness. There are 7 main chakras, and each one is like a string on a guitar. Each one resonates at a different vibrancy, a different frequency. And it affects the others. They all work together in synergistic unison. And when one is off, the others feel it. Again, let's go back to our analogy of Europe underground with all of those tunnels where metros travel all day long. When one is blocked, say there's an accident at one of the stations, the others are going to get backed up too. It affects the whole interconnected system. So we want those centers to be unblocked so that we can function at our highest capacity and we can achieve a higher way of being human, a more exalted way of experiencing life as a human. So the chakras, there's been much ado about the chakras. You can find information about the chakras in many different places. I just want to give an overview. The 7 main chakras, and in our tradition we consider the 8th to be the aura, our electromagnetic field, when balanced, allow us to function at that higher level. The first is at the base of the spine, and it's the color red. It's called the root chakra, and it's associated with the element earth. Now think about it. Think about the reason for this, because it's all about grounding us. It's our connection. It's our root to the earth. And when we don't feel grounded, when we don't feel connected to the earth, the result is tremendous insecurity. The first chakra is all about having. Its motto might be to have. It's all about survival. And we need to have in order to feel secure. And when we don't feel secure, the shadow side can be greed. It can be looking for security in all the wrong places. Sound familiar? People looking to fill that sense of security by hoarding or by consuming. And it becomes a real illness. And so the idea is to balance that so that we nourish our own sense of security in this world, living in this world, feeling that we make our ground our home, cover the ground we step on, we say in Zen. Everywhere we go, we feel at home, we feel grounded, we feel rooted like that tree, solid and steady. We feel that we can reside in trust rather than fear. That's the first chakra. Not living in a state of survival, because that's a very insecure place to live. Now the second chakra, that's the color orange. We're rising up the spine. That's our second chakra. That's associated with creation, our own creativity, our own productivity. Its element is water. So like water, we want to open up our own creative flow. And when that chakra is spinning properly, we are creative and we are in flow with that energy. It nurtures us. It's associated with our reproductive system, our sexual organs. It's located just below the pubis region. And when it flows, we feel very much connected and very much alive and very much in tune with our own creative abilities in everything we do, in the way that we nurture, in the way that we get along with others, and in the work that we do. Its motto would be to feel. The third chakra, the all-important navel chakra, what the Tibetans call the wind horse, what the Japanese call the hara, and what the Chinese call the dantian in martial arts. This is our source of personal power. And as you all know, when power goes bad, it has a shadow side. It can very easily slip over into manipulation. When power goes bad, we try to manipulate others because we don't feel secure enough to use that power in positive ways. So its motto would be to do, to act. That's our power. The color is yellow. The element is fire, because that's the fire burning in our navel chakra. And it is a fiery place. That's where the prana and the apana mix to create the uplifting of the Kundalini energy, a very important center. When we breathe, we nourish that center. It's like my Zen master used to say to me, there's a little Buddha residing in your belly. Why don't you see if you can wake him up? That's why we breathe deeply, to awaken that source of inner power. That's how karate is done. That's how kung fu is done. We're grounded. That's our source of power. It doesn't come from brawny force or muscles. It comes from down there. But again, it's got to be balanced, because the shadow side is a need to control and manipulate. And then when we don't get our way, it very easily slips into anger. So we've got to use our control and our power in positive ways. Fourth chakra, our heart center, the color green. The element is air. That is such an important center because it's the gateway between the lower chakra, the bottom three chakras, and our higher centers of consciousness, the upper three. The heart is right in the middle. Think about that. Its element is air. Air is above water. I love that because like air, it allows us to sort of float above it all as if we could walk on water. And when we live from the heart, we almost can, because we've let go of those attachments that keeps us so obsessed with the things that don't matter. When we lead from the heart, we always know what to do. The heart unlocks our intuition. When we lead from the heart, we relate to others from compassion. We are always looking to connect with others in a compassionate way through empathy. The unhealthy version of that is attachment, and that's what most people call love. But we don't want to love that way, guided by a sense of attachment, because then the undercurrent is jealousy and manipulation and suspicion. We want our relationships to be healthy, and the healthy kind of love has no attachment. It's when we can live together peacefully. It's when we can truly live and let live. It's when we can live in a state of acceptance, allowing others to be as they are, because we are guided from the heart and we want the best from others. And so that's the heart chakra, the anahata in Sanskrit. The fifth, our center of communication, our throat center, to speak, but also to listen. And not just to speak and listen with our organs, with our throat and with our ears, but to hear on a higher level, intuitively, to truly hear, to truly listen, and to speak from the heart. Again, that's how the chakras work together. The heart guides you, and so you speak consciously, conscientiously also, conscious communication. It comes from the heart, and it comes through the throat chakra in a very conscientious manner, so that we can live in harmony with others. So the fifth chakra is all about conscious communication. But in order to really hear, and in order to know what to say, and to speak from the heart, and to speak truthfully in non-hurtful ways, we have to get silent. We have to let go of our small selves in order to get beyond the ego and to hear what is really needed. What do we need to say in any given situation? And that's conscious communication. And when it's unblocked, of course, the result is that we start to feel constricted in our throat. We actually feel the physical effects of it. You know, we end up with sore throats, for example, or throat issues. The glands around the throat become affected, and so we actually start to suffer. And usually, you know, from an energetic point of view, we can say that is a very clear indication that the fifth chakra is not balanced. There's something that you're holding back. You're not speaking your truth. You're not living your truth. So, and the element is ether, and I love that, because it really means getting beyond all of this, you know, the worldly attachments, to the point where we can know intuitively and communicate according to what we know, according to that truth. So to consciously communicate means to say what we mean, but to do so conscientiously in non-hurtful ways, and to know what needs to be said. The sixth chakra, the third eye, center of intuition, associated with the pituitary gland in yoga. And through concentrated advanced yogic practices, that pituitary gland starts secreting and we open up to our intuition. And that's what's so fascinating. The physiological component, the energetic component, which is really what this is all about, of this practice. Opening up the third eye means opening up our intuition. And this doesn't have an element. This is beyond the elements. This is truly opening up our spiritual center. This is opening ourselves up to the seat of the self, our true self, the capital S self. Entering into the realization of our own divine nature, our connectedness with all that is, our cosmic self. It means going on to the realm that is beyond appearances, going beyond Maya, as the yogis say, entering into the status where we are masters. We become masters of our own existence when we open up the third eye. So the goal is really to open up into that psychic center. And by psychic, people think it means all kinds of things that it doesn't mean. The truth is, we all have those abilities to see beyond the senses. We just haven't opened up to it. We're trapped, in the world of material laws and the limits that we think we're stuck in. So the third eye opens us up into that realm where we let go of those limits that we thought we were stuck in. Finally, the seventh chakra, the crown chakra at the top of the head. And this is purple, by the way, violet. If seeing was the motto of the sixth chakra, the third eye, knowing is the motto of the crown chakra. But we're not talking about intellectual knowing. We're not talking about what comes from books. We're talking about knowing because we know, as we say in yoga. I know, and that is that. Because your chakras have opened you up into that divine wisdom that can only be had intuitively. We don't speak of blockages at this point. We just speak of the crown chakra as being opened or not. We are either awakened or we're not. And it's not to say that it doesn't happen in steps. It does happen in steps. But we open it up gradually, and it's not something that we have to unblock. It's something that we open up into, almost like an unfolding as a flower would unfold. So it's where our energy, so again, bringing this back to the level of our energetic field, our energy merges, again, yoga just means merging, with that cosmic energy field. There is no separation. It means I open up into my own divine awareness. That's divine union. Now in our tradition of Kundalini yoga, we also have an eighth chakra. That's our projection. That's our aura. And like the Earth's magnetic field, which contains it and protects it, when our aura is strong, that's our projection, and that contains us and protects us. And when it's not strong, when our radiance is weak, we are more apt to fall victim to our emotional swings and to fall into patterns of depression and anxiety and frustration and anger and all of those negative habitual responses that we get trapped in. But when our aura is strong, it carries our projection, and we're able to stay steady and carry ourselves past all of that. It protects us. And we are able to shape our world because we are responding to other people's energy pattern and their state of being, which we feel energetically, and they respond to ours. And so we begin to shape our universe that way. When our projection is strong, we stay contained. We're stronger all around energetically, and we're healthier. We're stronger, we're healthier, and we're awake. And so that's why we want a strong aura. That's our radiance. That's our vitality. That's our aliveness. That's our higher consciousness, and that's our harmony, our universal harmony, and our state of stability. But you can see it. When that radiance is weak, we're more apt to get sick, and we're more apt to fall victim to our own emotional swings. And so those are the chakras. Sat Nam.